Would you believe it? I'm standing still. Yes, still. Like a scenic statue. Well, minus the grace, and with considerably more emotionally conflicted shoe choices. That hasn't happened much lately. The last few days, a montage of trains I almost missed, doors that opened the wrong way, streets with too many opinions, and espresso that hit like emotional CPR. I keep thinking I'll wake up and feel settled. Instead, I just keep moving, like I'm being quietly chased by my own ambition. And one very persistent Google Maps rewrote. This is Italy, or at least my slightly overcooked version of it. Milan came first, and Milan is a city that doesn't explain itself. It just exists, powerfully, in 6-inch heels and monochrome layers. I thought I was prepared. Then I stepped outside and was promptly eaten by architecture. Everyone looks like they're on their way to a photo shoot or a breakup. Probably both. I didn't linger where I expected. I lingered in quiet alleys, old courtyards, and one very suspicious gelato shop that somehow unlocked a memory I didn't know I had. Also, pigeons here? They have opinions. Then came Turin, which was like Milan's quiet cousin, the one who organizes their bookshelf by mood and only speaks when it matters. It slowed me down, not with force, with design, long, straight streets, steady rhythms. Everything seemed to whisper, "Take your time, darling." I did. I stopped chasing moments, let them find me instead. And when I wasn't overthinking every espresso order, I was watching the light on stone facades like I suddenly had an art degree. Venice? Well, Venice tore up the rulebook. I arrived with a plan. Venice laughed. Maps meant nothing. Schedules dissolved like sugar in hot coffee. And I, too, dissolved into bridges, reflections, and the soft slap of water against stone. I got lost so many times I started to believe it was a feature, not a bug. Every wrong turn brought a right feeling. Every canal carried a soundtrack. Mostly footsteps, whispers, and that one gondolier who was definitely singing to his own reflection. Florence was last, which felt unfair because it's so dramatic, like a finale that doesn't need your applause, but gets it anyway. It's where you notice hands, gestures, touches that say more than words. I got distracted, in a good way, by statues that stare back, piazzas that hold memory like breath, and markets that smell like your grandmother's kitchen. If your grandmother also sold cured meats and leather belts. I stayed longer in places I didn't even know existed, and that, I think, was the point. So, 1 week, 4 cities, each with its own personality disorder, or charm depending on your sleep schedule. And me, somewhere in the middle, slightly sunburnt, deeply caffeinated, and still wondering whether that staircase in Milan was symbolic or just poorly designed. No neat summaries, just a blur of beautiful moments I didn't expect, didn't control, and didn't want to. And now, I'm standing still for a second, but not for long. Italy isn't done with me yet, and neither, apparently, is my to-do list.
Welcome to Milan. Milan is Italy's business capital. This is where banks sit, where contracts are signed, where things are designed, manufactured, and sent out into the world. You feel that straight away. The city is polished, busy, confident.
And then you notice the clothes. Milan is the fashion capital of Italy. And honestly, standing here, that doesn't feel like a slogan. It feels like fact. Gucci, Armani, Prada. These names aren't window dressing here. They're part of the city's bloodstream, and you feel it immediately. People are dressed beautifully, not dressed up, not dressed to be seen, just exquisitely put together, even when they're buying coffee or crossing the street. Milan has a way of making you feel underdressed. Joe, I'm looking at you.
I'd like to point out that I packed responsibly. What you're seeing on the street didn't happen by accident. Milan already had the infrastructure fashion needs: textiles, skilled labor, workshops, supply chains, and access to markets. So when those fashion houses grew, they stayed rooted here. Design, production, and decision-making remained close together. That's why the style here doesn't feel trend-led. It feels established.
And it's not just nice outfits, it's the standard. A coat that falls properly when someone turns. A shirt that fits like it was made for that exact body. Shoes that look expensive without shouting about it. Even the casual looks aren't really casual. They're just effortless. And yes, I've been shopping all day. Not because I needed anything, but because Milan makes you believe, for a brief, delusional moment, that if you buy the right jacket, you'll immediately start living your best life.
At the center of Milan is the Duomo di Milano. It's the city's cathedral, and construction began in the late 1300s. It took centuries to complete. The building is made primarily from white marble. The scale is immediate. Hundreds of statues, dense stonework, vertical lines pulling your eyes upward. Inside, the space is vast but ordered. Massive columns rise into vaulted ceilings. There are stained glass windows and painted details that soften the stone without distracting from it. This is a building designed to last, structurally, materially, deliberately.
Up on the roof, the Duomo becomes something else entirely. You're allowed up here because this cathedral was built to be worked on, maintained, repaired, added to, over centuries. The roof isn't decorative, it's functional. You walk among the details now. Spires, carvings, repetition everywhere. The same shapes again and again cut by hand. And the view is ridiculous. You can see Milan stretching in every direction. Rooftops, streets, movement everywhere. And yes, Joe, I can see you down there. You look exactly like someone who packed responsibly.
A short walk away is the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II. It was built in the 19th century as a covered arcade connecting key parts of the city. A glass roof, iron structure, and wide passageways. It's lined with cafes, restaurants, and long-established shops. People don't just pass through. They meet here, sit here, pause here. It works because it balances movement and lingering. You can cross the city or spend an hour doing nothing at all.
Then there's Santa Maria delle Grazie, where Leonardo's Last Supper is. Standing in front of it is strange. You know the image so well, but the scale is different. It's quieter than you expect, more fragile. You're very aware that this is something that's survived, barely, and that your time with it is limited, which, honestly, makes me hungry. I sat down afterwards with a bowl of pasta that I'm still thinking about. Simple, rich, perfectly balanced. The kind of food that makes you immediately plan when you're going to eat it again. I can already tell you what I'm ordering tomorrow. While I'm eating, Joe can handle the quiz.
Milan's cathedral took far longer to complete than most medieval cathedrals. What was the main constraint that shaped both the pace and structure of its construction? A. Repeated changes in artistic direction. B. Structural instability beneath the site. C. Reliance on a single marble source that required dedicated transport systems. D. Long interruptions caused by fires and rebuilding. That's Milan, a city where craft, style, and patience intersect, and where things tend to last because they're built to. Think you know the answer? To enter a chance to win is easy. I'm in Turin, standing at a cafe bar, not sitting, not scrolling, just standing, like everyone else. I ordered an espresso and something called a bicerin. It arrives in a small glass, layered very deliberately, espresso on top, chocolate underneath, cream in the middle, holding it together like a peace treaty. You don't stir it, that's important. You wait, then you drink it exactly as it is. The espresso hits first, sharp, focused, then the chocolate shows up, thick and dark, closer to melted chocolate than a drink. The cream slows everything down. By the time you finish, you're not sure if you've had a coffee or dessert, or accidentally skipped breakfast altogether. Around me, locals are doing the same thing. Order, sip, pay, leave, no one sitting, no refills, no laptops. This isn't a cafe you linger in, it's a pause, a reset. That's how my day in Turin started. If Sarah were here, she'd still be at the counter, rating the foam, asking follow-up questions, possibly drawing a diagram. Turin sits in the northwest of Italy, just south of the Alps. On a clear day, the mountains feel close enough to keep an eye on you. This was a Roman city. And unlike many places where that's just trivia, you can still feel it here. The Romans laid Turin out in a grid. Straight streets, clean intersections, designed for movement. Back then, carts and soldiers. Now, cars, trams, and espresso-fueled tourists like me. Here's the thing. That layout still works. Cities change. Trends come and go. But when something is designed properly from the start, it lasts. What worked then still works now. One of the smartest features in Turin, the arcades. Kilometers of covered walkways running through the city, built centuries ago so people could move around no matter the weather. Rain? You stay dry. Sun? You stay shaded. Snow? Still walking. For locals, it's just normal life. For visitors, it's basically a guided tour with a roof. You can walk for ages without ever needing an umbrella. That's not an accident. That's planning. Turin doesn't shout about its design, it just quietly makes your day easier. Near the center, everything opens up into Piazza Castello. Wide, formal, balanced. This was the power center of the House of Savoy, the royal family that played a huge role in shaping Italy. You can see it in the architecture. No unnecessary decoration, no chaos, just scale, symmetry, authority expressed through stone. It's also, very practically, an excellent place to figure out where you are. Turin is considerate like that. Then there's the Mole Antonelliana. You'll see it from almost anywhere in the city. Tall, unmissable, slightly dramatic. It was originally meant to be a synagogue. Then the project changed hands. Then it became a monument. Today, it houses the National Museum of Cinema. Here's the interesting part. They built it tall before they fully knew what it would become, which feels fitting for cinema. Inside, the museum doesn't just celebrate movies, it explains them. Cameras, lighting, angles, mechanics, how stories are built from light and timing. Turin likes understanding how things work, not just enjoying the final result. Sarah would have tapped out halfway through. Unless there was popcorn, then she'd be unstoppable. Turin's modern identity is deeply tied to industry. This is the home of fiat, of factories, engineers, and people who build things that need to function properly. That mindset shaped the city. It's why the historic center still feels lived in, not staged, not frozen in time. People work here, shop here, live here. The city doesn't feel like it's performing for tourists, and that's a rare thing. Food matters here too. We're in Piedmont, a region known for truffles, rich sauces, and meals that take their time. You don't rush lunch, you don't grab dinner to go. You sit, you stay, you talk. This is where Sarah would absolutely take control of the menu and order a little bit of everything with total confidence. Turin isn't loud. It doesn't try to impress you immediately. It rewards patience. If you like cities that are efficient, thoughtful, and quietly confident, this one's a masterclass. Now, let's see if you've been paying attention. Before Rome, before Cinecittà, before Italy became famous for film, Turin was Italy's original film capital. Here's your question. In the early 1900s, Turin helped pioneer a filmmaking innovation that changed cinema worldwide, and we still use versions of it today. Which one was it? A. The first use of artificial studio lighting. B. The earliest feature-length films shot entirely on location. C. The world's first permanent film studios. Or was it D, the invention of camera tracking shots on rails? Drop your answer in the comments with hashtag QuizzesWithFlare and no Googling. That's how trivia loses its soul.
Picture this. Early morning, soft light brushes the water, Venice stretches, blinks, and begins to wake. Venice is one of those places you feel like you've already been to. You've seen it in films, perfume ads, luxury handbag campaigns, even that one ad for digestive biscuits that tried very hard to be seductive. So, by the time you get here, you think, yeah, I know this place. Spoiler, you don't. Here's the thing no one tells you. Venice doesn't operate like a normal city. There are no cars, no streets, no just around the corner. You walk, you cross bridges, you follow alleys that look like mistakes until they open into a perfect little square, and you pretend you meant to do that. It's beautiful. It's disorienting. Joe loved that part. Naturally. Piazza San Marco. This is where Venice stops whispering and starts performing. The heart of the city, giant, ornate, slightly full of itself. This is where they held those legendary carnival balls. Everyone in masks, no names, no status, just drama, mystery, and very poor lighting decisions. If you've ever wanted to feel like a small person with big opinions, this is a very encouraging setting. Columns, arches, pigeons with zero respect for personal space. This is also where Venice plays a little game called How Long Can You Pretend You're Just Passing Through Before You Get Hopelessly, Gloriously Lost? Answer, not long. The Basilica? Not your typical Italian church. It's got layers. Like tiramisu, but for history nerds. Gold mosaics, onion domes, a visual shout-out to Venice's trading routes with the East, Constantinople, North Africa, the Middle East. Most cities hide their influences. Venice built them into the front of its church and said, look what we can do. Even if you don't know the backstory, you feel it. It's confident, it's weird, it's unapologetically extra. This is also where Joe started giving impromptu history tours. To me, to a stranger, to a particularly unamused marble column. Next door, the Doge's palace. Looks like dessert, is actually power. The Doge, elected ruler of Venice. This was the nerve center, the government, the courts. Venice wasn't a vibe, it was a machine. Goods moved, money moved, secrets moved, and Venice took a cut. The Bridge of Sighs? Not romantic, it connects the palace to the prisons. You'd get sentenced, glance one last time at the city through a tiny window, and then sigh into the shadows. So yeah, that pretty cake has teeth. This isn't just the canal. This is the Grand Canal. It's Venice flexing. These aren't just buildings, they're palazzos, literal palaces, built when Venice was loaded. Boat entrances, chandeliers, gossip echoing off marble. Now, those grand entrances, underwater. The tide didn't ask, it just rose. And instead of abandoning their homes, people just moved up a floor, and then another. Life. Vertical. Of course we did the gondola ride, because if you don't slightly regret a tourist trap afterwards, did you even go? Murano is where beauty becomes molten. Glassblowing is part art, part magic, part please don't touch anything. I lasted about 30 seconds before thinking, yep, I could totally do this. Which is exactly why I should never be allowed near hot tools. Joe and I stood there in reverent silence, not out of respect, but because we were both deeply afraid of asking the world's dumbest question. Murano is Venice's quieter cousin, the one in bright colors who doesn't need attention, but gets it anyway. It started as a fishing village, still smells a bit like one if the wind's feeling honest. The houses, painted in bold, brilliant shades, not for Instagram, but so fishermen could actually find their homes in the fog. Practical, adorable, slightly chaotic. It's not curated, it's not posing, it's just being. Murano feels like Venice kicked off its heels, took off the mask, and said, right, who's putting the kettle on? All right, thinking caps on. Why did Venice really move all its glassmakers to Murano? Was it A, in 1600 to protect them from floods, B, in 1291 to prevent fires and keep trade secrets under wraps, C, in 1063 while rebuilding St. Mark's Basilica, D, a trick question. They never moved at all? If you got that right, either you really know Venice, or you collect obscure dates the way some people collect novelty mugs.
I've been excited about Florence for a long time, because this is where the Renaissance started, not as an idea, as a real place you can still walk through. And that changes how you arrive. For much of its history, Florence was not ruled by kings. It was a city-state, controlled by wealthy families who made their money through banking and trade. The most influential of these families were the Medici. They began as bankers, then became political leaders. Because they controlled enormous wealth, they decided which buildings were funded, which artists were supported, and which public projects moved forward. That shaped Florence for centuries. That system meant artists, architects, scientists, and thinkers were funded, protected, and challenged, often at the same time. That environment produced people like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Sandro Botticelli, and Galileo Galilei. Not by accident, by structure. Michelangelo is the most recognizable master of that approach. Everyone knows Leonardo da Vinci's drawing, the human figure with arms and legs extended inside a circle. That image exists because artists here studied the human body properly. Muscle, bone, balance. That understanding became the standard going forward. As a visitor, you feel that immediately. The Duomo di Firenze dominates the city. White, green, and pink marble, a vast dome sitting above it all. Some aspects of how it was constructed are still debated by engineers. Standing underneath it, you don't just think, that's beautiful. You think, how did they get away with this? That's Florence in one moment. The Palazzo Vecchio was the seat of government for this city-state. Civic authority and cultural ambition were built side by side. The same people shaping politics were funding the look and identity of the city. That's visible everywhere. You step away from the monuments, turn a corner, and someone is restoring leather in a doorway. Not for show, for work. That contrast holds all day. World-famous masterpieces, then everyday craft continuing quietly beside them. The Ponte Vecchio is the only bridge in Florence that survived World War II. Goldsmith shops line both sides. The walkway is narrow, busy, lived in. You're not crossing it, you're inside it. We stopped for lunch near the square. Fresh ciabatta, a thick vegetable soup, simple pasta done properly. Sarah looked at the plate and said, "So this is why people stay." Then she added, "You'd leave the house for 5 minutes, come back an hour later, having accidentally learned something about art, engineering, and history without meaning to. All right, time to test your art smarts with a question most people think they know. Michelangelo's David is one of the most iconic sculptures in the world. But what unusual truth makes it even more impressive? A. It was carved entirely without preliminary sketches or plans. B. It was sculpted from a block of marble that had been rejected by other artists. C. Michelangelo sculpted it in complete secrecy, behind closed doors. D. The statue originally had golden leaf details on the sling and hair. Think you know the answer? Drop it in the comments with Quizzes with Flair and tag that one friend who still calls it the naked statue guy. And no Googling. Even David would frown at that. I keep coming back to one idea from this week in Italy. Scale. Not the dramatic kind. Not mountains or monuments blown up by sweeping music, but the practical kind. The kind of scale that quietly reshapes your body, your pace, and eventually, your head. Milan. That first city, measured scale in surface and finish, stone, glass, pavement. Everything is finished. Everything holds its line. You feel it. Even crossing the street feels like it expects a purpose, a reason, a mission. Walking here is like someone set the tempo, and you don't want to be late. It's the kind of place that makes small steps feel intentional. Then came Turin, and everything changed again. Remember Turin? Here, scale isn't about pressure, it's about possibility. Long, straight streets. Buildings that don't lean in and whisper instructions. Arcades that stretch for kilometers, like covered promises. If Milan measures your intention, Turin measures your system. Here, the city almost carries you. There's space for logic to unfold, for you to think while you walk. Then we tumbled into Venice. Oh my dear Venice. If Milan was intent, and Turin was conversation, Venice was chaos in couture. You stop when the water says stop. You turn because the street ended. You wait because the boat is in the mood. Navigation becomes physical. It stops being abstract. You don't choose turns, you obey them. Streets narrow, then vanish. Like someone said, let's make maps optional and charming. So that's when I knew my internal compass filed for retirement by lunchtime. And then there was Florence. Florence compresses scale again, but in a completely different way. It's not the pace that tightens, it's the density of history. Stone worn down at shoulder height. Corners softened by centuries of brushes and elbows. Thresholds smoothed by feet walking the same path for hundreds of years. Florence doesn't tell you where to look. It just smiles at you while you remember what time feels like. What stays with me isn't one spectacular moment. It isn't a selfie spot, or even that one gelato that ruined my diet. It's the way each of these cities demanded a different body. Not physically different, but attitudinally different. Your pace changes, your attention shifts. What you register without effort in one place requires conscious focus in the next. By the end of the week, I became aware of how much understanding a place comes down to compliance. Sounds dull, but it's brilliant. You walk the way it allows. You stop where it makes stopping unavoidable. You recognize the language of the streets, not because you learned it, but because you felt it. Italy doesn't ask you to observe it. It asks you to move within it. And movement here isn't just locomotion. It's comprehension. And that accumulation of steps, stops, patterns, sounds, textures, temperatures, that's the real experience. Not a highlight, not a conclusion, not a polished postcard, just the residue of having been here long enough for these cities to make a lasting impression. Now, if you thought week 1 was interesting, wait until week 2, because next, we're going deeper. New cities with new ways of bending space and inviting movement. New traditions. New surprises. And yes, more joy. So here's what I want you to do. Like the video if you felt even a tiny part of what I'm talking about. Comment with the city that threw you off balance most. Share this with that friend who insists they don't need a map. And if you want more curious insights, head over to quizzes.gamaflare.com. Game on, minds open, and curiosity rewarded. And yes, leaderboard glory does exist. Week 1 didn't just end, it lingered. It folded into how I walk, how I think, how I notice the small things that matter. Week 2? We're still walking. But the ground has new rules, and I'll see you there. Because curiosity isn't a destination, it's the next step.